Hello, everyone. This is Marjorie Hanna with Girls Right Now. I am here this evening with a very special guest. We have with us today the founding director of the Writers House Intern Program, Michael Mejias. And I'm super excited to have you here with me today. Met you a few months ago at this point, and we had a very candid conversation then. So, just kick things off. Could you just tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from?
Sure. I'm from the South Bronx, from the West Farms housing projects there. Uh, East Tremont on the 2-5 line. Um, Went to parochial schools, local parochial schools. Graduated from Hunter College with both a joint BA, MA in theater.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize you were a theater guy.
I'm a theater guy. Before I was a publishing guy, I was the theater guy.
Okay, all right. So, was that kind of your career goals going into college?
No, before that, I went to school in Florida to study how to fly planes and got booted out of there and came back and rethought about, gave a lot of thought to what I really wanted to do and started at Hunter thinking that I'd be the next great American novelist. Um, Took an intro to theater class with a gentleman named Ed Wilson, who was also the drama critic for the New Republic, and he took a shine to me. And we were talking one day, and I think I was trying to convince him that I shouldn't have to write the final paper, and he made a deal with me since he knew I had literary aspirations. He was like, write a short play and I'll accept that instead of the paper. And I went, yeah, how hard could it be? And I wrote a short play that ended up getting produced at the college, and then it won a big grant and an award, and we traveled the tri-state area with it. And by the time we got back, I had decided I was going to try to be a playwright. And so that was kind of the first or second stanza in 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 my life, in my professional life anyway.
Okay, so you went from like you said studying plants.
Plays. Excuse me. Pilot. No, excuse me. I went from studying to fly planes.
Oh, planes. Okay, I was way off. Okay.
Yeah.
It's
So I went
it's it's
I
it's
went to
late.
flight school. I went to the Florida Institute of Technology to study flight technology and aviation management, and got thrown out of there pretty unceremoniously, and regrouped and started at Hunter in what is now known as McCully.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Which is pretty competitive.
Yeah, I guess it's a big deal now, but it probably wasn't as big a deal in the 30s when I went. Uh, uh, so I don't know if I'd get in now, but got in then.
Okay. So you're writing plays, you graduate, and how did you end up at the writer's house? How did you sort of
Yeah, that I was failing as a playwright in as much as I couldn't really get a lot of traction. I didn't write that play that delivered me from off Broadway to off Broadway. Um, that it took me a long time to stop enjoying being a young playwright on the rise. And I woke up one day and I was a not so young playwright uh, 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 anymore. And opportunities dried up for me. And there weren't a lot of them, but I was like, what else can I do? And I had been kind of making my way by being a playwright and theater artist on the off Broadway level, and teaching college and being an adjunct,
Hmm.
uh, and cobbling an existence in New York that way, very hands to mouth. And a friend of mine was working at Writer's House and mentioned the opportunity and said, "Hey, the guy who founded the place is just like you, Michael. He's a failed playwright and academic." And um, I put I guess my cover and resume and all of that together, and came in and interviewed with Al, and I think he probably said hi, and then I spoke for 3 hours and uh, uh, broke his will, and I think he had no other recourse than to hire me to shut me up. So uh, that's how it all really started.
And it's been a while. So when you first joined Writer's House, what were you doing?
Say that again.
What were you? What was your job
I
function?
was going to be. I assisted him. I worked the front desk, and did that for a long time. I didn't want to be an agent. I discovered I wasn't very good at it. That the books that I wanted to do were going to be very, very hard for me to sell. That I was really interested in a dragon book if the kid flying on it looked like one of us. Or if I'm gonna do a vampire book, the vampire has to look like one of us. That that book wasn't going to be big and successful, and that to really be the best agent, you got to be good at a particular kind of book that I had no interest in. That wasn't really a Michael Mejias job. That the problem wasn't that I wasn't good yet. It's that I didn't want to be good at that, if that's what being good meant. And I founded the Writers House intern program in 2000, and that kind of became something that was interesting to me. So I was the receptionist, office manager, director of the program. And then it kept evolving and growing and becoming a bigger and bigger thing in the consciousness of the industry. It started to serve as a pipeline, and it became a bigger and bigger part of my portfolio. These days, I work on the operations side, so I help the CFO, and the VP of Business Affairs, and run not only the Writers House intern program, but the Writers House Mentor Initiative, which is something that I grew from the ground up, I guess, a couple of years back now, 3 years. Maybe that program's 3 years old. And it deals specifically with uh, publishing aspirants from the BIPOC space.
So this is really interesting. So, well, first off, I just have to ask: do you find that there's been a shift in selling books with the kid who looks like one of us, flying on the dragons? I guess that's my first question. Do you feel like there's been an industry shift? Um, and I guess, my second question would be, considering you are grooming talent to enter these spaces that hopefully sort of change the lens in which we are assessing what is publishable and what's not, which I know kind of comes down to the bottom line at the end of the day. But what ways do you feel, if any, things have changed?
We're talking about it more. I think we went from flat out denials of what was very obviously true to talking about it in more meaningful ways. And sometimes these talks have legs. Sometimes, we get a little traction, and sometimes uh, there are improvements in areas. But is it enough? It isn't nearly enough. It isn't nearly enough. Um, there's more, and there are more people who look like us in the way that, 6 cents is more than a nickel. You know, sure,
Mhm.
that more we're populating publishing more now than in its 500-year history. But when you consider it's been 500 years, uh, it's not a very good showing, right? That when you look at our white counterparts, how well represented are we against that? Against that, that before the Lee and Low survey, or what the first Lee and Low survey? Do you know the Lee and Low survey?
Could you elaborate a little bit?
Sure. Lee and Low is a publisher, and they took it upon themselves to kind of lead the charge around diversity. And it was really their study, a study they commissioned, that was published in 2015, that articulated what we all knew. There aren't a lot of BIPOC people in publishing, right? And um, I would imagine fueled somewhat by shame. You know, we fancy ourselves liberal progressives, after all. Um, we started to talk about it in substantive ways. Now, that report stated this, that publishing was 5% Black, 6% Latinx, 7% Asian. 5, 6, 7. A second report, a second survey was commissioned by Lee and Low that was published in 2020, 5 years later. And between 2015 and 2020, I must have done 100, and I remember this, 137 diversity days, events around that in that time, in that 5 year span. And the new report told us this. We went from 5% Black people to 6% Black people, from 6% Latinx people to 7% Latinx people. And the biggest jump was Asian, from 7% to 10%. And if you look at the composition of the suburbs, if you look at the composition of a lot of different things, right? What that's a better measurement of is comfortability.
Mhm.
How comfortable our white counterparts are around us. In other words, before they start moving out, before there is an expression of concern, that you'll see that those things align. If you look at any survey from the Urban League or the NAACP, that you'll see that the numbers match up around that. So it's probably a better gauge and measure of this simple and delicate truth, that we move at the speed of somebody else's comfort.
Mm. Wow. First, I just want to pause and acknowledge that you kind of mentioned Al saw himself in you. So, as you're working with young people now in this program, how much of yourself do you see in your participants? And um, because you're from the South Bronx.
I am.
So, all right. So, and then, so you're bringing obviously some real life experience and education into what you do.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of interested in how that can inform success. And you mentioned like the comfortability of white people in publishing and how that kind of keeps the pace of how diverse these settings are. Um, so there's the skills that maybe you can talk about what it takes to make it, and then now you're here in this space,
Hmm.
and what does it really take to stay there and be well while you're there, right? Because if you're there, and
Hmm.
once you're in the door, is it you know many of us, we don't really find it worthwhile, right? Like it's either you find it worthwhile and you have a north star and you hang on, or you don't. So can you maybe kind of speak towards all of that, which I know I kind of just.
Sure, I'll try to answer that question and then you'll tell me how well I'm doing.
Okay.
That when I talk to different groups, I'm called in to speak at the Big Five, I'm called in to address this issue a lot, that I always start with the word will. It's the will of leadership. The will of leadership at Writer's House has always been there. That in the most important ways, that they're ready to resource this program. They were willing to do this. This might be an institution now or given now, 23 years after the fact, after 567 people have been placed out of this program. But before all of that, Al and Amy had to say yes. And then Simon and Amy had to say yes. And they've backed it and they've backed me from the very start. Way before we were talking about this, they were talking about this, the importance of that. And so it's been very easy for me to work here, live my professional life here. Also, I'm from a completely different generation that, and this is what I mean by that. Um, I had the talents and skills that delivered me to different social circles very early on. That I was eligible for educational opportunities that aren't afforded everyone I grew up with, not everyone. And so living and moving through white spaces was something I learned to do. That America is. There's a reason we were called minorities, and it was just the mathematical truth. We're close to that not being true, but certainly when I was in high school, it was the truth. And negotiating those spaces was just another thing I had to become adept at.
Mhm.
And the benefit of that is that I have requisite techniques. I have the techniques and methodologies in psychology and mental toughness that I don't think that a racist comment that's pointed in my direction is a reflection of me. I've never thought that.
Mhm.
I've always thought it was a reflection of the person who said it. I didn't think it was a stain on my shirt. I thought it was a stain on theirs. And the way that I could prove that to myself always was by repeating it out loud to a room full of people when that person was present. And that person would always recoil because they didn't want that thing they said to be public.
Mhm.
And if they were ready to stand by that, why wouldn't they want everyone to know? Why would they want it kept a secret? Why did they want to disassociate themselves with it? They're the ones that said it, and it was unprompted. And so I learned that very early on, that they want to say those things, they want to use those words, they want to say what they're saying. Fine, that's about them. That's about them and never about me. And I'm not going to give it a second thought. I think that we have a different generation now who's like, this person said something bad. I have to go and write about it on Facebook or insert social media platform and, get supported by friends. Whatever that answer is, um, and I don't know if that's healthy. I don't know. I don't know what that teaches us. I don't know what it teaches that individual, because it was very easy for me. My goals were my goals and my dreams were my dreams, and I didn't want anyone to deter for their bad words or their poor opinion of me. I'm a person of color in America. I know generally how people think of me. I know how people generally think of me. It may not be me specifically, Michael Mejias, but when you say Puerto Ricans from the South Bronx, you're probably not thinking of somebody who's going to walk in with a Brooks Brothers jacket on, right? And whatever that means is whatever that means, and that's not about me. That they have to carry the weight of that. And I think it's funny how racism could twist our thinking, because we make it our shame.
Mm-hmm.
And I simply didn't buy that cup of water.
So how do you so your program, you said it kind of focuses on prepping BIPOC, young BIPOC.
Well, the Writers House Mentor Initiative does. There are two programs.
Okay.
There's the long-standing Writers House intern program, which has always had a BIPOC presence from Jump Street. How could it not, right? But the Writers House Mentor Initiative, which we founded in 2020, deals very specifically with the BIPOC experience in publishing.
And do DEIB issues come up? How do you talk about how to navigate, mostly white spaces, and how to not internalize other people's projections or, lack of
That,
language?
no, because it's not really where my expertise is.
Hmm.
So to go, don't internalize it. Let me tell you how not to do that isn't what I'm qualified to do. I could certainly listen, and if there's a way to arrive at validation by just bearing witness and hearing that
Yeah.
out. Naturally, at Writer's House, again, leadership has put in place ways for dealing with those types of issues on the very rare occasion they surface. But it starts with, the will of leadership again, to have that and enforce it. And I'm confident in our leadership to do just that. And the tone is created by them.
Hmm.
And in here, I've been fortunate enough to participate in the hiring processes and staffing for a generation. So a lot of the people that are junior staff, hell, at this point, even some senior staff, really are out of my programs. And they're authentic allies. They're people who are plugged in. There are people who are sensitive. There are people who are staunchly anti-racist, that are doing the reading and the work. But more than that, because that's an intellectual response.
Hmm.
More than that, there's this, that it's just simply the way they practice their lives. It's just simply that they have people, they're in relationships with people who look like us. And that's how they're different than their parents and the people who came before them. And the cycle, that's how really the cycle breaks. It isn't like, I'm going to take up Pilates and then I'm going to stop doing Pilates, that it isn't that. It isn't a hobby. It's how you practice your life. And certainly the people that come through my programs, it's just simply the way they practice their lives. And it's odd for them to, for us to be absent. And that's the thing,
Hmm.
that our absence is normal. So we're always fighting to redefine normal. That's what that's why the question, can I help you, is loaded. When you're in a neighborhood that isn't your neighborhood, when you're walking on the sidewalk in a suburb, when you walk into a department store, that can I help you is loaded because it really is, what are you doing here? You don't look like you're here to shop. I don't believe that someone who looks like you is here, right? And that your intentions aren't nefarious, right? That's what that means. They don't actually want to help me pick something out for my girlfriend. That's not what they're trying. That's not what they're trying. They're really going, hey, what are you doing here? Are you here to steal? Are you here to do something that I don't want you to do? Right? They're just smiling when they say it.
So do you? It sounds like you've spoken about comfortability and the way people live their lives. Is there also just I know I have a friend who heads an imprint that focuses on BIPOC publishing,
Mm-hmm,
and I had a conversation with her, and I remember when she was just starting in publishing junior, and she, worked her way up, executive editor, had some really big wins, and so now she has her own um, at one of the big fives, right? And I asked her, like, why did you stick around? Because I did a little, a short tenure in publishing,
mm-hmm,
wasn't really for me.
mm-hmm,
And she said, well, when I came in, she had a mentor who was a black woman, and I know this an editor who also I worked with, and she definitely just would mentor everyone if she could, and she did if you had access to her, which she would graciously provide. And she said, I knew what the possibilities were, right? Like when I came in, there was there were different imprints that really they were a bit more diverse. So you'd go to work and you'd see a handful of black people and they were publishing black authors. And so she said, I knew the possibility. And, of course it took some time for her to ascend the ranks, but she's there. um, how do you feel, if you have an opinion on spaces that are homogenous, but on the other side, right? They're not, plain milk, they're the chocolate milk. Or are
mm-hmm.
those sort of spaces important to you? Or do you think, in terms of producing the best work, providing everyone with ample opportunity, um, diversifying voices, all of that, is it more about mixing everyone up and integrating everyone, or is it also kind of holding spaces for different types of people for their comfortability?
Why can't it be both? Is always, we have Burger King and McDonald's.
Yeah.
We have Nike and Adidas. It's always curious to me that when it comes to issues of race, we want it has to be Bloods or Crips. It has to be Capulets or Montagues. When typically, aren't we always trying to go, why not all of it?
Hmm.
That we clearly need, we're at a point in our history in this country and in publishing where we just simply need imprints that are exclusively BIPOC. But there's something incriminating about that. And this is what I mean is, are we saying, and maybe yeah, maybe no, are we saying that we can't be equitable in any other way? That we have to have these special imprints because we can't expect the people like Knopf and Viking and William Morrow and Crown to, to be equitable and to have a representation that reflects back the citizenry of this country. We're 30, Black, brown, Asian, 38% of the population. Is that it's not 38% of publishing though, and it's certainly not 38% of the books we publish. That it seems like a lot when there used to be none, right? There's that joke Eddie Murphy used to tell: if you're starving and then you give somebody a cracker, it'll be the greatest thing that they've ever had. Is this a cracker? Is it saltine? Like that sort of thing. How'd you make this? Right? So yes, I get it more than ever. But go and compare that, even though we're 38% of the population, compare it to the white counterparts. I get it that there are more books by Latinx people being published than ever before. But look at it in comparison to how many Latinx people you have in the country. Right? And then it's simple math to see the disparity. Let me ask you this. How many of those books get reviewed in the Times against their white counterparts? How many book reviewers look like us? How about at the New Yorker? How about at the New Republic? How about at the Monthly? How about at Plowshares? How about Paris Review? Right? In all of the golden calves. Right? How about Kirkus? Until recently, if they had one, I would have been impressed. Until very recently. And again, measure it against how long all of these magazines have been in circulation.
Isn't that always an uphill climb to sort of fight, infiltrate spaces with people who kind of have their own values? And I think it may be human nature. I'm speculating a bit, but to want to see people who look like you or share beliefs or whatnot to be affirmed in media. So there's kind of that bias anyway. So, that kind of, if we look at it in terms of, okay, we have to diversify these spaces, which I agree, we definitely should. But doesn't that sort of leave room for the majority to always set the agenda and therefore always set the standard or decide what's of value, right? And then there's the, I think, a heightened probability of diverse voices being, even if they are published, a little bit muffled or at the whimsy of this standard that's already been created. Like how can, I mean, how can diverse arts of BIPOC people truly be appreciated for what they are? Like, must they have that sort of white validation?
I'm going to answer all of that in a couple of different ways. Uh, First of all, we don't have to diversify publishing. We don't have to.
Yeah.
Says who? Says who? We don't have to. And that's the thing. Do we want to? Do we want to? I've been doing this a long time. I've never worried about anything that anybody else wanted but me. That people think that I'm trying to persuade them. And that isn't true. Mostly I'm trying to replace them. That I don't need to over centralize white people in my life.
Mm-hmm.
That there are people who are central to me in my life that are white, but just in general, I don't elevate their want over mine. And that's a weird thing to have to say. And people feel affronted by that,
Mm-hmm.
which is odd. But I do accept objectively that the publishing as an industry doesn't have to. The governing principle of publishing isn't to do that. We seem to think that it is, and it isn't. Liberal progressives with a particular ideology think that that's what that publishing exists for that agenda, and it's a pretty unsophisticated way of looking at it because it just simply isn't so. The way a cat isn't a bird, it isn't. Those are two different things, right? That the governing principles of publishing, and the way I've observed it from being at one of the top agencies on the planet Earth, is to sell books.
Mm-hmm.
That is the objective. Sell a lot of books, right? That's the way I understand it, and that's absolutely fine. Now, I go, everybody's fighting over this 42%. And I'm like, well, how about this over here? How about this 38%? That's a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
right? 52%, 38. But it's a lot of people. That why aren't we monetizing that? I always and I do a lot of reading around uh, the history of sneakers in my community because I'm from the poorest congressional district in the country. And Nike managed to sell us $500 sneakers. And I could go there right now and go and hang out at that corner that I used to hang out in 70s and 80s. And everyone will have $500 kicks on. And again, it's the poorest congressional district in the country. And they have 20 pair. Right? That we should be studying how Nike did that. We should be studying how Nike did that. Because it's about, let's go, who's going to be the smart person that goes, you know what? We're leaving the 95 cents on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Publishing is fighting each other for the nickel. Black, brown, and Asian are 38% of the population. By 2050, it's more. Don't you think it's high time we get good at this? So I go, we can't sell somebody that in inner cities. We can't sell something that costs $7.95 to Black, brown, and Asian people. Nike could sell it at $500 a pop. That's like if you have a lemonade stand and you're selling your lemonade for $500 a glass, and I have a lemonade stand and I'm only charging $7.95, and there's a line around the block for your lemonade, and nobody's buying mine. Like, what do we do? How do we do this? How do we do what Nike is doing, what Adidas is doing, what Puma is doing, what BIPOC does? How do we do it? Right? And the person that does that is going to be the big innovator in publishing in the 21st century. The person that cracks that code is going to really be pioneering because they're going to have 100% of a market share for a while. That you go and you check out who the decision makers are at these places and where they're from, and you're not going to find a lot of people that look like us. And until that changes, I don't think you're going to have that kind of innovation or that kind of breakthrough or that kind of cultural IQ. Mm-hmm. If we're still pretending that 5 or 6% is enough, if we're still if we're still going 17% is good, hooray for us. Look, it used to be 2% and now it's that it needs to be 38%. They need to populate the executive levels because that's where the ideas are going to come from. How come music is always first? because they're younger and the executives look like us, right? The executives look like us too. And they're quick to embrace technology, they're quick to monetize it, they're quick to leverage it, right?
Yeah.
That the way Reese Witherspoon has an imprint, and you know, Dr. Dre could have one. That Jay-Z and his wife could have one. That the people who look like us follow their lead. If Jay-Z and his wife go, hey, everyone, buy this book, they're going to buy this book. They are. They are. We should be in relationships with churches. We want to sell books to BIPOC folks, to black and brown people. I know where they are on Sundays, right? The poorest neighborhoods have churches. What they don't have are bookstores.
Yeah, it's a valid point. Of course, it's where all the networking is done is in the church. It's kind of
Yeah.
the golf course of I know of Black communities for sure.
Yeah. Black and brown communities, I you'll sell more units, which is ultimately the name of the game.
Yeah.
And but you need somebody with enough influence that looks like us to make that happen.
So you're saying that oftentimes BIPOC books are just not selling to
It's
this extent,
I don't know
or
if
the community Black BIPOC people are not buying books.
um you know everything I've ever purchased in my life, and everything you've ever purchased in your life, you had to see it first. And if you don't see it, you're not going to know about it to buy it. And I don't know if we're putting the product in front of the people enough.
Mm-hmm.
I have to keep showing you this. You want this? No? How about now? No? How about now? No? How about now? You know, that it's kind of like I go and I buy this tie, and by the time I get home, there are like 80 ads for Brooks Brother ties. Like on my, the second I open my computer, they're like, "We know you bought this tie. Do you want these 800 other ties? How about this vest? How about this jacket? How about this shirt?" Right? That it's through repetition. I'll give you a different analogy. I know the lyrics to 1,000 silly songs from the 80s because I heard them a billion times
Mm-hmm.
on Z100 and 92 and WKTU 92 and all the top 40 stations of my teen years. I could probably sing 5 or 6 Duran Duran songs. I'm not proud of it, but I can. I probably know the lyrics of, you know, girls just want to have fun. Um, that because I heard it 800 times. That you want to sell something to me and I'm still living in those neighborhoods, you've got to put it in front of me, and I don't know how good we are at that.
Hmm. Yeah.
That if you're going, hi, let's take Michael's book about 4 or 5 kids growing up in the South Bronx, and let's try to sell this to white people. I don't know how well that's going to perform, right? But unless it gets great reviews and it becomes a hot book, you know, but you know, black and brown kids from inner cities might be interested, right?
Aren't there these universal themes though? I mean, you can, look at J.K. Rowling's, right? And
Mhm.
this kid and he's a wizard and you know, so because there's just, it's the universal themes that everyone can relate to. Why is that so difficult when it comes to BIPOC?
It's very easy because we are, if you grow up in this country anyway,
Mhm.
that we're from the second we start to consume popular culture, we're growing our fluency in education and IQ on the things that centralize white people. That I saw like everybody else. I'll see I'll see Rocky 15. I will see Sylvester Stallone play that part until one of us passes this mortal coil. I will go watch him play Rambo, regardless of how ridiculous the premise is. I will go see every Indiana Jones movie. I will see every Star Wars thing. I will the but by the time I was, 12, that was true. I was used to centralizing people who didn't look like me and seeing myself in the cracks and crevices of the white person's imagination.
Mm-hmm.
I'm used to that. That America hasn't equipped our white counterparts to do the same. They're gonna go, oh no, this is one of those books that will make me feel bad,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That you have to read it to arrive at the conclusion that there are universal themes. You're just not going to see, what's the title of your last play, Michael? Ghetto Babylon. I see the universal themes in that. If you go, if you go, yes, if you go see my play, you might walk out of that experience with that conclusion. But that's not what you're not going to arrive at that conclusion, Marjorie, by just going, what's it about? It's about five kids growing up in the South Bronx. You're going to go, that's not for me. Because I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit or Chicago or whatever, Philadelphia, right? Why would I be interested? So it isn't quid pro quo. You think that it is. You seem to be suggesting that it is, and it isn't.
I mean, you're kind of making the case though for homogenous spaces on the other side, because if there's $500 sneakers everywhere in the South Bronx,
Mm-hmm.
so the commerce is being exchanged, right? There's some capital, um, and black and brown communities will support their own. I mean, I think you have. I think Tyler Perry's kind of like low key a good example of this, right? Like I know he's slapstick, all of that, but he had a very specific audience originally. You had your black church ladies, you did your plays, you traveled everywhere. You weren't
Mm-hmm.
begging for the crumbs, so to speak, right? So you were able to build wealth
Mm-hmm.
from your community, reinvest in your community, because then you're hiring black actors, everybody's black on the set. And then sooner or later you start showing up to these events and movies, and then, oh my gosh, it's kind of diverse, right? There's white people there, there's other people there, but that was all built off of commerce circulating within a specific community, which I don't think is abnormal. I think most groups do circulate their money within a community. And I guess publishing is just a larger indicator of that, that we maybe, put this mask on, and because it's the arts, and even imprints that were founded to publish BIPOC authors, I mean, or diverse authors. Diversity can mean anything at this point, right? So even the groups of people certain spaces were created for even end up a little pushed out, right? Because again, I know that if this person is diverse, whatever, however the quantifiers of diversity are in that setting, but they still look, they're still white, or they still look like the majority population. They take up those spaces. I get a diversity mark. I still make the money because people are still comfortable, going back to your point. So I don't know. I think I do agree with you. I think it's both, but I think you're kind of listening. I'm like, I think this kind of argues the case of um I don't know, I guess self-sufficiency, and internal investment. But I'm probably biased to think that. Listen, my mother is from Oklahoma, so all my people are from Tulsa, Oklahoma. So that's where Black Wall Street existed, where you had your own airports and your doctors and all of that. So I kind of come from that legacy. So that's my lens. So listening to you talk about
Right.
this, I'm like,
But it's like this. I'm not saying not to have that. I'm saying, why does it have to be one or the other? What I'm against is going, it's either one or the other, not having it. I
I
understand why you have to have it. The way I know why you need the Negro Ensemble Company and why you need black theaters that just do black narratives, and why you need the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, and why you need the Dramatic Question Theater, and why you need Mejias, and why you need these theaters that do specific narratives. But at the same time, I don't think it's fair to the artist to go, you're just here. You don't get the public theater and you don't get Lincoln Center. And if we're not careful, that becomes the messaging.
I,
That
I
we go, I don't want Knopf going, we'll let Amistad handle it. I don't want, because that's where the biggest money is. And we want our authors I'm not going to go tell Colson Whitehead that he has to be at this smaller imprint with smaller resources when the guy's won 2 Pulitzer Prizes, right? That we want them represented. We want them represented in both spaces. That's what I want. I don't trust publishing
mhm.
to not interpret it in a way that lets them off the hook. When you look at their 500-year record, I have every right to hold them suspect, right? So I don't want to say, here we have a couple of imprints at each of the big 5, and
Mhm.
that's for us.
Mhm.
And you guys get everything else. No way. No way. That isn't equitable. That isn't equitable. We get both. And then we get both. Why? Go look at the 500-year history of publishing and just American history, and how we've been erased and how we've been omitted and how we've been marked absent. That it's equity, which is different than equality. And this is the difference.
Mhm.
If somebody already starts with $10 and I only have $1, and then you come and you give us each $10, now that person has $20 and I have 11. And you come back the next day and you keep giving us each an equal amount. That person's always still ahead of me.
Mhm. Yeah.
Equity is different. Equity is like, I'm going to give Michael more so that he's even with that person. And then he goes from there.
No, I don't disagree. I think both are needed. I think both are needed.
Right. So then there's that. And then just wrote some stuff down, but I can't read my handwriting. Uh, oh, yeah, this. That we're not used to buying books. That we're not, because nobody's really gotten good at selling us books. That growing up, a lot of my friends didn't even believe there was a place called a bookstore, and they just sold books. That was as a construct preposterous. That as a construct. There used to be a skit on Saturday Night Live a long time ago that there was a store, and the skit was about a store that just sold Scotch tape.
Mhm.
And it's and say you're smiling, they're smirk. That's how preposterous it was to some of my friends. There would be a store that just sold books. You mean books that you could get for free in the library? The idea of recreational reading is something that even a generation ago or 2 generations ago uh, would have been odd to people in my life. Like if it wasn't to learn how to fix something or do something, they didn't understand. Recreational reading it was something certainly in Puerto Rico, the artists and the intellectuals. did recreational reading, students, people like that. But if you didn't fall into those categories, so buying books is relatively, if you'll forgive the pun, novel.
Hmm.
And what are we doing as an industry about that? And again, when we haven't the cultural know-how, and go, hey, it's a book by this Puerto Rican guy. Maybe we're targeting, maybe we're looking at the Daily News and the Post if we're going to go print and not the New Yorker and the Monthly and the Times.
Hmm.
And maybe these podcasts instead of those podcasts, right? Maybe we get them on Angie Martinez or something, right? Uh, uh, that that if I'm looking this way, you've got to put the book in front of me, right? You can't put it over here and
Right.
expect me to buy it.
Yeah.
And that's what I think happens. That, well, Michael, why can't they just turn around? And I'm like, well, why can't you just put it in front of them the way you always put things in front of people?
Hmm.
Right? And until you get people who look like us making those decisions routinely, it's not going to become routine practice. By the very virtue of what routine means. If we stay outliers, if we stay irregular, the practices stay irregular. Right? That if we are irregular, the successes are irregular.
Hmm.
And so the bottom line is that we have to populate it to the rate of 38%. And that's the answer. And that's the answer. Let's recruit well, let's place well, and then help motor that ascendancy. That there are going to be good times and hard times. People are going to say things, but that's in any profession, that's just living in this country at this point in time. But why does that deter you from your dream? I always go, why does our side always want to quit? Our side is, I'm going to go be sad. I'm going to go quit. I'm going to go complain. That's our side. That's what we get good at. Not being resilient and not being tough and not moving forward and not getting what we want. That it's fine if people don't like me. I'm still here. My name is still on that door. They like me enough. I have family and friends for that other stuff. But I don't see what's going to get accomplished if somebody said something that I found offensive and I quit Writer's House. There'd be a lot of people who wouldn't have jobs now. That's all that's being accomplished. That's all that's being accomplished.
So I want to ask you, what successful recruitment and replacement looks like. How do or what is the approach and strategy in order to successfully recruit and replace your participants?
Oh, that we're lucky to be successful. And successful is the best recruitment tool. That young people know how to find you, so you just have to be out there. And it's not like I'm a big social media person. Um, you might know this about me, but I'll say it to the shock and dismay of the people who are going to watch this later. I've never owned a cell phone in my life.
Oh, wow.
Never ever. If you gave me your cell phone, I'd be like, I command you to turn on. I don't know how to really use it. Um, um, but I'm an easy guy to find. I'm pretty accessible. No one's ever said that I'm not. And that I exist and I look like this. People find me. That I usually uh, uh, don't don't say yes to interviews. I'm not that type of person. That I take the mission seriously. I'm lucky to be able to do it here. It's like I said on another occasion. It's not a job. It's not a career. It's a mission. This is what I do. This is what I believe in. That when this camera turns off later, I still talk about this. This is what is part of my narrative of being me. Um, and so that helps. I get to pick typically from around 1,200 people, sometimes more in the summer. It's probably closer to 2,000
Mm.
applicants per term. I do 3 terms for the intern program. It's summer, spring, and fall. And there are hundreds of applicants to choose from. That I'm always looking for representation, and I'm giving them every opportunity without being unfair, because ultimately it's a rigorous course, and they have to be able to do it. And I'm not doing them. I'm doing them a huge disservice if they simply haven't the skill sets or the mental toughness to do this course. That I'm not easy, and I'm not trying to be.
Okay, that was my question, and that kind of what makes you tick. It's just it's doing the work.
That much to the chagrin of a lot of people in my life, I'm not motivated by money. Uh, I'm, I'm simply, I probably should be more, but that isn't why I do anything. I've never done anything for that. Um, and again, like August Wilson said, with all the crookeds and all the straights, that's the truth about me.
Mhm.
Uh, Maybe it was being, I didn't even know I would have this much money when, when I was like, this is all right. I'm not the richest dude in town, but I'm the poorest guy in town, and I get to be Michael for a living.
So you're being your authentic self, and that's one of the things about it. Like, what? How would you define authenticity?
I don't know if I do. That people have a way with language that's head scratching. I can tell you, I could answer it this way. It's the advice your mom gave you when she was taking you to PK, holding your hand, and it was your very first day of school ever. And she just said, be yourself. It's that to me. That's the way I'll define it. That I believe what I believe. I get to express that without fear of reprisal, but doing it even when I fear reprisal. Um, um, that wearing what I want to wear, because this is the thing about us, and by us I mean people of color, that we can politicize ourselves. Our hair is politicized, our noses, our features are politicized, the color of our skin politicized. It means something that I'm wearing a jacket and tie. And sometimes that something isn't very good. Sometimes I'm antagonizing people
Mm.
by wearing a jacket and tie, because there are people who feel that I feel a particular way. Now, this hasn't been investigated by them. They just see me and feel antagonized because our bodies are and our choices are politicized. If we go to Howard, that means something. But it also means something if you don't go to Howard, right? If you go to Yale, that means something. But if you don't go, hell, if you go to college, that meets with antagonism. And the same people that applaud you can resent you all at once, all at once, in the same day, in the same hour, in the same minute, in the same second, right? So being authentic in the face of the people who love you, to me, is a bigger sign and a greater sign of authenticity, or keeping it, whatever we want to call that, whatever we want to, emotional heroism, because those are the people that we said are important in our lives. that, for better or for worse, and to the chagrin of a lot of people, this is the way I am. Uh, cameras off or cameras on, and uh, and that's it. And there are people who have been very close to me that don't like me for it sometimes, and I have to accept that. I have to accept that because for you, Marjorie Hannah, to find me acceptable, I have to find myself acceptable first.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to make sure that's true. And I do know at 57 that that comes at a cost. Alas.
No, that's you're saying a lot there. Good point. We definitely have to just like the person we see in the mirror, at least the internal person. But it comes at a cost. I'm going to have to think about that and how to be responsible for that cost and be okay with paying the cost to just be oneself and feeling balanced in that. So,
That we seem to think that it's the people out there, the strangers. They're strangers.
mhm.
I'm never going to see this person in my life ever again if I don't want to. What? Some guy said something to me on the subway? I'm never seeing this person again, ever. Right? That person is pretty small. For me to engage them is to make me a fool because now this person's in my life in a way that I don't want this person to be. But it's the people in our circle of friends and our families that we have to say no to. That this is who I am. Mom, dad, brother, sister, cousin, nephew, niece, so on and so forth. Best friend number one, best friend number two, best friend number three. It's saying no to those guys. It's standing up to those people who go, since I've known you a long time, I get to make decisions for you, that I own a part of your free will. That right or wrong, the decisions are mine to make. I'm not saying that I'm right all of the time, but all of the time I get to be wrong if that's what I choose. And people seem to think that because I'm wrong or life proves me wrong, that I should have listened to them. I'm never going to, and again, with my significant other always rolls her eyes at this one. I'm simply not that interested in another person's opinion over mine. It's just, it's just not the thing, I'm not saying, am I saying that I'm right all the time? Nope. It's probably 50-50. But you know what? If I'm in charge, then I'm making the decision. That's it. And that's all. And I'll always live with the consequences of that.
Do you ever get on the 2 or 5 and go back to the South Bronx outside of, I hear you're a Yankees fan, but outside of that?
That no, there is occasion if they go, Michael, come speak here, or will you come and do an event, and then or unfortunately someone passes, and life boomerangs me back to the old stomping grounds.
Do you feel
Um,
like that was necessary to your success to kind of let go of certain people, places, things in order to ascend the ranks, so to speak, or to really kind of find your purpose and walk in it?
I think it would have been difficult. It's ultimately what I chose.
Mhm.
That I had particular skills, particular talents, particular ambitions that pointed me in other directions. And it made the people, places, and things less necessary. And they became of less import to what I was trying to accomplish. And for them too. It's not like they were standing around waiting for me to show up like, I'm Napoleon. Like, that wasn't really what was going on. They went that way, I went this way because their their life pulled them in the direction their lives pulled them. My life pulled me in another way, and so that's how that worked out. That it's a funny thing that happens with relationships that we certainly want to grow them and hope that we keep choosing each other. That if you and I, Marjorie, knew each other when we were 10, then I hope that we are friends when we're 14, and then when we're 20, and then when we're 30, and then well, I don't think you're 50, but I'm 50. But, and maybe for a while that's true, and then less so for a lot of different reasons. That a life of a 10-year-old is different than one of 50, you know?
Right.
That it could be a lot of different things. When we're all here, in here, and we have to be in here because we're 10, and there's X amount of mobility I have when I'm 10 than when I'm 20 and I could be anywhere, you know? And then we're friends because we're all here, but what happens when we don't have to be? You know? So a lot of different things, happen. These days, I'm grateful for having had those relationships at all. Not that they're not active anymore. I'm not remorseful around that. I'm happy that I had them because they were important then. That those were the relationships I needed, and I was lucky to have them. And I think back at the people who needed them and didn't have them, and that has contributed as much as anything to my success. I would love for the narrative to be true that my extraordinary abilities and talents and genius elevated me. No, no, no. I think I'm pretty ordinary and caught a few breaks. I think my mother was influential in the neighborhood too. She was an RN who was very community facing, and I remember being very young, and she would take me with her. She would she worked she was a nurse, RN in the ICU at Jacoby Hospital, and would work from 11 o'clock at night to like 11 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning. And she would come home and eat something, and then she would kind of do rounds in the neighborhood. And she would make sure that people were taking their medications correctly, get on the phone with Social Security, talk to doctors to make sure that everybody understood and translated to our neighbors what needed to be done and what their appointments were and whatever, and did a lot of troubleshooting. So I think that being in service to people probably grew in my estimation that way. That I grew ambitious in a particular way
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the things you see, back to that, the things you see all of the time.
Hmm.
The things you see all of the time are the things that help to really shape and form your value system and what's important and what's not, and what you want to be and what you don't want to be.
Yeah.
You know,
That's a whole other can of worms because now we're kind of getting into, yeah, that it's what we see in our household and school and even the larger culture. But we that's a whole other can of that's a
and
whole
that's the
other can
thing. My mother was about reading. She was like, read magazines, read, buy me all the comic books I wanted, read comic books, read magazines. The schools I went to, really, the parents and the teachers were all about reading, 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 reading. And so that becomes, if you see it in your household, and it's the thing your mom is doing, and you're 6, your mom's the most important person in your life. So if she's doing it, then you're going to do it.
hmm
I'm going to read the paper. I want to learn to read quickly so I know what's happening with the Yankees. I want to learn how to read quickly so I know what's happening with Batman.
Hmm.
You know, and that when you're from where I'm from, it's the easiest way to travel because you could go and read a National Geographic and be all over the world in like 45 minminutes.
Oh yeah,
You know,
I love National Geographic. What other sort of or what life changing books did you read as a youth or even as an adult that kind of stuck with you?
the Catcher in the Rye
Yeah.
is always that's a very easy one for me.
Hmm.
That they put it in my hands when I was very young, and little did I know that it was what prompted this march to this thing. That that um, and the irony isn't lost on me that it's about the biggest crybabyest white dude around. I kind of love that. The book is that because I grew up, a few miles away from Holden Caulfield,
Hmm.
but like a galaxy away from Holden Caulfield
Right.
too. And that was what was exciting. That to me, the power of this story, the power of these words, reach through time and space. This is published in 51, and I probably read it late 70s, early 80s, and through race and class, and grabbed me and hasn't let me go. And I think that that's amazing. And I went, wow, writing could do that. And maybe that's what I should do.
Okay. It was that book for you. So how about now? Are you reading anything good?
Am I reading anything good? I think that what am I reading? What am I reading? I'm reading When Crack Was King. I started that book and put it down because, and this is what happens. I suddenly have to read a lot of applications, and I know that what that's like. And I've got to read a lot of readers' reports that my interns are generating for me, and review assignments and do a lot of mentor engagements, and you know so that pulls me away from recreational reading. That I think the last thing I read, uh, The Wealth of Whiteness, I I read and liked. I got a book about Lorraine Hansberry, and I liked that a lot too. Um, and I just read Young Charges. He wrote a graphic novel, and I
Hmm.
just read that, and I like it. And we're talking a lot about that. So that's kind of the reading that populates my life. I read the New Yorker because my significant other just got a subscription. I read Esquire because I have a subscription to that magazine for some reason. I do. So I read American theater, uh, um, and I read a lot around. I read the sports pages of every major periodical to read about the Yankees.
Okay.
That's the regular reading that I'm doing.
Nice. Okay. And what about writing? Are you working on anything?
Yeah, I've been for the last 5 years um, working steadily on this musical with a couple of other special folks. I have two great collaborators. And we're putting together this piece. It's called The Bridge, and it's a reimagining. It's a musical, and it's a reimagining around the building of the Brooklyn Bridge.
Okay.
And so at least that's what is happening. What it's really about is this, because and it's relevant to what we've been talking about, Marjorie. Who gets to participate in history and who doesn't?
Hmm.
And part of the overall agenda is to push out women and BIPOC from our history, right? To mark us absent in a serial way,
Hmm.
perpetuates the idea that no one but white men have contributed to American history and American success and American might, right?
Yeah.
That it's exclusively the authorship of white Christian men, right? And the reason that's important is that it helps to justify why things are the way they are,
Hmm.
right? That if you participated in history, and if I participated in history, if BIPOC participated in history, if women participated in history, they feel they're less special, right? And maybe we'll start asking questions as to how things are so inequitable and so disproportionate. It's very easy to believe the narrative that this is all even Steven, especially if you're winning,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
It's just the easier thing to believe. It's just the easier thing to believe. James Baldwin said it best, and I like to quote James Baldwin because then I look smart. Um, um, and I'm pretty beef with it. But and I'm paraphrasing, but it's like this: racism lies to white people too,
hmm, absolutely.
right? That hey, you have the suburbs and all of this and the manicured lawn because your parents loved you and they worked hard. Now, we're not saying anything about Michael and his map. We're just saying that you're right. So you go to school with these guys and they feel, hey, my parents worked hard for this.
It's the
That's why we
sorcerer's stone, right? Like it's it's that magic key of just belief and confidence, and it's almost delusion to the point where it sort of manifests itself often.
and why is there such a pushback? Why are we even calling it critical race theory? It's just the thing that happened. It's just the thing that actually happened. See what I mean? This all is a fight around what the word normal means
Hmm.
and what the word history means. We don't teach American history. We teach American mythology.
Right.
That it's just not what happened. It's a curated version of this truth.
Yeah.
That, yeah, the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. I don't know why people even think that or say that. That's not true. Well, a little bit, right? It was like, it was about states' rights. Yes, the rights to have slaves. you know? I'm pretty sure slaves are in there somehow, you know? But why can't we just speak to what is historically, objectively true, the thing that actually happened without this other word, creating another word for it? We shouldn't have another word for it. It should just be history, and we should explain it like this. We used to tell half truths. We studied half truth history. Columbus didn't discover America. He didn't. That isn't me being anti Italian. He didn't any more than I did. You know, any more than I did. He simply didn't discover America. That's just objectively inaccurate. That's just factually inaccurate. You might as well say 1 + 1 is 3, because that isn't true, and Columbus discovering America isn't true. So why can't we say that
Well,
definitively,
it's gonna
conclusively?
it's gonna destroy the power structure, right? You're gonna see the transference of wealth, which you already started seeing like during Reconstruction. That's why we've talked about publishing and the system, and we do need to infiltrate these spaces and for it to be representative of the actual population. But again, there's something powerful about holding space within. Like there was a lot of wealth amassed, for instance, of people who were one generation away from enslavement, right? Like that really happened, and that's why you
Mhm.
had these attacks
Sure.
on, in Tulsa, in Greenwood. You have them everywhere. We don't learn about them, but
Right.
things really
It's
happen because
exactly. And
it's
why
like you're
aren't
getting too much. So here comes Jim Crow, right? So it's like you achieve. It never was everyone
and that
was a loser
why
or
isn't
lazy or
that
is over
studied
emotional.
and why isn't that studied as a serial event, the serial event that it is? Because I think it would help grow the understanding for everybody.
It would, but I think, you have people holding on to that power, right? Because if I can be swayed on mediocre and still out succeed talented, smart people just because of the power structure in this country, and I'm benefiting from that, I'd probably be a little hesitant to tell the truth as well. I'm not saying me personally, but
Right.
people who are motivated by that power, and power corrupts, right? Like, if who's to say what would be what?
And I absolutely, and I go, listen, the first step, because all of this is true, and I go, well, why don't we say just that part? That, hey, by design, we kept this out. By design, we kept this out. These things happen. There isn't Puerto Rican history. There isn't Latinx history or Latinx American this is part of American history because the only thing that really we need for that statement to be true is for it to happen in America. You
Right.
know,
That's right.
that this happened in America. And that is it. That's what it really is. And once you start omitting people, places, and things, now we're back to mythology because it's doing what mythology does, explaining why, the earth spins or the sun is in the air through unscientific means by betraying facts, right? The earth spins because it's on top of a big giant turtle or whatever. And Columbus discovered America. And the Civil War wasn't fought over slavery. you know, that. And yeah, let's omit what we did in Tulsa and all of these other places, right? That let's study the history of laws in this country and why we even needed them. We actually had to pass anti lynching laws. That, we had to write a law that said you cannot hang people. And some people felt that was unfair, you know, and there was pushback that we are from this country, and why don't we get to say we're from a country where that's true? We're from a country where people who look like you and people who look like me, on the occasion we try to exercise our free will and constitutional right of voting, we were met with the worst kind of aggression. Bats, and not just bats with barbed wire wrapped around it. That always stays with me, those images. That somebody didn't feel that cracking my head open with a bat sufficed. That they wanted to stop at the hardware store and buy barbed wire and wrap it around their bat so they could pull the flesh off my head too. That this is the country we live in and lived in. And this wasn't thousands of years ago because we're not that old. This was like 60 years ago, you know, that, and that we don't get to say that is problematic.
Right.
That we don't get to articulate and really speak to the disparity is problematic. That we're still denying that there is a problem at all, that it isn't unusual and it just happens to be incidental, that the suburbs look the way the suburbs look, and the inner cities look the way the inner cities look. And the people who live there just incidentally look this way, and the people who live over here just incidentally look that way. That all of this is by chance is what we have to attack. And that the lie is that there isn't a lie. you know, the lie is that there is a lie being perpetrated. That it's like, well, this is just the way it worked out. Maybe Marjorie Hanna doesn't want to live in, this nice house with a manicured lawn and a pool. Maybe she wants to live in under these circumstances over here. Maybe she does. Maybe that's what she's choosing. Yeah, that's what she's choosing. We've decided. Why ask Marjorie Hanna when we could just decide for her? Right? And then you go see a house and you get, how can I help you? Back to that. you know, that you don't look like someone who would be happy here,
Right.
right? Meaning I'm going to make you unhappy here, right? So that's it. That there are issues. That is it better? It's better in that we get to talk about it a little more. I'd love to see that really translate into more action and more results. I'm not seeing outcomes. I'm seeing people satisfied with talking, but I'm not seeing outcomes. And I feel on most days that the strategy is to, hey, let the victory be that we're talking about it. But we don't really have to do anything more than that, right? Because we're going to do whatever we have to do to maintain the status quo. And the important thing is that things don't really change. And that's problematic because more and more there are people who look like us who do want to participate in this space.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This was amazing.
Yeah, this helps. This was good.
This was a fantastic conversation. Michael Mejias, I
Yes.
appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We appreciate you. And until next time.
Thank you.